and welcome to this first edition of Marketing Evolution, Adapt or Die. And we are here with Jodi Daniels, who is a great example of that. I kind of came up with that title because I do feel like today's world is moving so quickly that if you can't stay up with it, that you really could fall behind and go out of business or have a data breach, which, is, we constantly hear about those in the news. So Jodi is an expert in all things about data security. Welcome to the show, Jodi.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
So I know you have a presentation to go to right after this one, but tell us a little bit about how you got into making this like your area of expertise.
Sure. So I, about 10 years ago, built an advertising network for Autotrader.com. So I like to say I used to stalk you for cars. So if you bought a Toyota Highlander and you were looking for Honda Pilot and you were searching on Autotrader, it was probably me who convinced you otherwise. And so some people think stalking you with cookies and digital technologies is creepy. And so as a result, the online advertising industry came together with some self-regulatory guidelines. I was responsible for Autotrader and then also Kelley Blue Book's compliance with those. And from there, I built a full-time privacy position at Cox Automotive, started and built a privacy program for them. Then I went on to Bank of America and was their digital privacy lead. And then last summer, 2017, I went out and started a boutique consultancy.
Yeah, I'm sure you saw that the need for this is huge. The consequences are great when you don't protect privacy. And it seems like the laws are just now sort of catching up to the issue.
They really are. So there's a lot of privacy regulation that's coming into the market. So for example, in Europe, there's something called the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. And if anyone's ever seen that cookie banner that appears now at the bottom of websites, that's actually GDPR to think for that. So that's one regulation, and it affected all U.S. companies who were serving EU residents. And you didn't have to have an actual location in Europe. You just had to be serving and targeting EU residents. So, and GDPR is what I call sweeping the globe. So other countries are starting to adapt it, and we're starting to hear a little bit in the U.S. as well.
So I do want to let everyone know, if you're watching this live on Pro Video Talent Facebook page or anywhere else, just go ahead and ask Jodi questions. We may or put in your comments, and we'd love to know also, where you're from. If you can put in like where you're from and into the comments section. But Jodi is just a fantastic expert, a rare opportunity to be able to have somebody like this that you can ask your questions to. So tell us what type of clients. I was looking on your website. It seems like you've got clients in every size that come to you.
I really do. So I love to help the solopreneur all the way to the big multinational company. And people always ask me, is there a certain revenue size or employee base that I work with? And the answer is honestly no. I've worked with some startups that have more data than a huge 100 million, even $1 billion company. It's really just about the type of data that a company is collecting. Now, the companies that have a bigger online presence, right, they have a website, they're doing transaction data, maybe they're doing a lot in the advertising space, or maybe they're a software or cloud provider, like in the B2B market, and supporting another business. So kind of a big gamut, not too many manufacturing. Though interesting, there's actually some of the manufacturing companies now have software that goes with the device. And so all the data collected on the software connected to the physical product also has to be considered from a privacy and a security standpoint.
So what do you think is the biggest mistakes that, like, you hear about these security breaches and, huge company like Facebook, and what are the biggest mistakes that companies are making that causes this?
So a couple things. So first, from a cybersecurity perspective, most cybersecurity experts would say it's not a matter of if, but when they're going to have a cybersecurity breach. So even the best companies in the world who are doing amazing at protection, the bad guys are always a step ahead. So from that point of view, it's really hard to have 100% perfect security. But I think generally speaking, companies aren't putting it first. They don't have even a person or even half a person focused on privacy and security. So I think that's number one. Then they're doing it as an afterthought. It's this big compliance activity instead of proactively and incorporating it into everything that they're doing. So really making it part of the beginning project, right? We're always, how much is something going to cost? How many people do I need? What kind of legal contract do I need? I want companies to start thinking and asking the same privacy questions, just like they do the other ones.
And that brings to mind one of the things that you say, that privacy is, and I love the way you put this, it's not just, it shouldn't be about just compliance
Right.
or about avoiding fines. It should be that you care about people's privacy and you respect the fact that people want privacy.
Absolutely. I think if you put the customer first in every decision that you're making, when you're deciding what email should I send them, what targeted advertising should I do, what data do I need to collect in the transaction, if you put the customer at the middle and you think about what that end customer would want, what do they expect, then I think you're going to get them to give you more data.
Yeah, and you're going to...
And it's going to be a trusted relationship.
Yes, and I love how you start on your website about trust and the idea that you could walk up to a stranger and say, hey, tell me all this stuff. And yet through a computer, we kind of do that all the time. We don't build any trust. We just say, hey, give us your email. And every time I go shopping, they're like, hey, what's your email? And so my husband and I would do something like so silly, like he'd go to, go to a store and buy something. And I would give his email always so that they would bombard him with it. So I'm vegetarian or pescatarian. So he goes to a butcher shop and gives them my email. So it's almost like everywhere you go, you start to feel like you have to give that to someone, and you don't.
Yeah, I remember being in a retail store. I'll let them remain nameless, but the person was at the counter and they wanted to enroll them in the loyalty program. They didn't explain what they were doing. They just said, "Can I have your phone number?" And then the person starts giving the phone number. "Can I have your email?" And the person starts giving the email. And then at the end, it was, okay, well, here's your loyalty card. But they never explained why. So I come along, I'm the privacy person, so I'm not giving you my information. But maybe if you had told me, hey, we're going to enroll you in this loyalty program. You're going to get X, Y, and Z. This is what we're going to do with your data. Now you put me and my concerns first, as opposed to you just getting more data and mining me and trying to figure out what my income bracket is and how much spending I'm going to do. That's why so many of those companies are collecting data. It's not really about me. They're disguising it as a loyalty program. So just be honest, and you'll establish a better relationship. I'll be more loyal, and I'll be more inclined to give you more of my personal data. And I think this is really true when you start thinking about, beyond retail or a butcher shop. But think about healthcare, right? And all the different IoT devices that we have. That you really have to think about, well, what is this company monitoring about me? And who are they? And can I trust them?
Yeah, and speaking of healthcare, it's been interesting to me. I worked in the news for years, and people would complain about HIPAA, and they still do, complain about how difficult it is. And it does make things difficult in some ways. But my gosh, before that, it was crazy. I mean, who could find out your most private data?
Right. Well, what's really important on that, so first, funny, you go to a doctor's office, and when they sign the form that says you've received your privacy notice, but they didn't actually give it to you, ask them for it. And then they'll be confused and go in this dusty drawer and try and pull one out. It's kind of fun. Maybe just a privacy geek does that. But the other thing related to HIPAA is we have so many healthcare devices that it's health-related information, right? Is anyone collecting your calories or how many steps you walked? And you think that's health information and it's protected, but it's actually not covered at all by HIPAA. HIPAA is really about the electronic exchange of data between a doctor's office and an insurance company.
Yeah.
It's not about just health data. So all those third-party apps that people are entering in their blood pressure and their sleep and their heart rate and what they ate and that company is processing it, they don't have to comply with HIPAA. It's optional. They could, but they don't have to. So now you have to be thinking about, well, what is that company doing with the data? Who are they selling it to?
And in a lot of cases, employers will tell their employees, go and get on one of these and we'll give you discounts and all of this. And I had never really thought about it until you just brought it up. But yeah, then the employer at the very least, I would think, gets information about like whether or not you might have sleep apnea, high blood pressure, all of these things that, could that go into a decision about whether or not to keep you working if they have to have layoffs? I mean, that's I guess, a worst case scenario.
Possible. I would think the third-party company would probably keep it separate from the employer.
You hope.
I would hope, but it's possible because there's not a law that says that they can't necessarily share it. Now, we would hope that there shouldn't be discrimination around that. And those are some of what I call the data ethics issues that we have to deal with. So if I have all this data that I'm collecting and I'm processing it, if there's not a law that says I can't do it, what am I doing with it?
And as a company, sell it to a third party, and could a third party then buy
absolutely.
it? Absolutely.
Yeah. So Fitbit was an example where they were processing all this data, and it was years ago, but one of the senators, U.S. senators, questioned what was Fitbit doing with this data. And it didn't really do a great job of communicating all the data it was collecting, and so that the end user knew you're selling it, you're not selling it, you're processing it, you're not processing it. What are you doing with it? Just tell me. So I really feel like the user experience is super important. So when a company is, let's just use Fitbit. So if a company like Fitbit is saying, here's my great product, here's all the wonderful things we're going to do, give us all your information, at the outset, when I register and sign up for it, list, this is the kind of data we're going to collect. This is what we're going to do with it. And I don't mean the long, boring privacy notice that, yes, I write, and from a legal perspective, you need to have on the page, whether it's HIPAA or not. All websites need to have a privacy notice. I don't mean buried down there. I mean on the sign-up page, right? Think about the objections that someone might have or the concerns and put it there, alleviate them. And that to me is the competitive advantage, where a company can then say, I care about you as a person. This is my amazing product. This is what it's going to do for you. And I care about your privacy and security. This is how. And now again, it goes back to the trust.
Yeah, so interesting. I think I could talk to you for like hours about this, because so much of this becomes a part of our life that unless you're in that field, you don't really even think about it. Like I said, everything from Fitbit, knowing everything about your health, to, going to Eddie Bauer and just giving them your email address and everything else. And it's funny, I wonder how you'll see this. When Facebook first came out, I literally thought, like, this is the greatest thing ever, right? That it's like I can keep in touch with my news friends, from back in the day, and I see their kids and all this. Price to pay, I realize as a marketing person, I call Facebook just a marketing database that we feed it every single day. Like, we are doing it. It used to cost so much to go out and get, like you said, what's your income? What are your hobbies? What kind of house do you live in? We literally give that to Facebook every day, and they don't pay for it. We just willingly give it. What was your thought when they first came out on it?
So at first, I'm a prolific Facebook user.
I am.
But I didn't sign up for Facebook right away. I'm not the early adopter. I'm always a little bit, I want to test it out and see what I think. But I completely know what Facebook is doing with the information. They're categorizing it, they're marketing, they're selling it. I was a company using Facebook's data and had to be actually in the evaluation stage in the early part when they were first doing custom audiences, which any marketer listening is, of course, you use custom audiences. Well, companies used to be very leery of custom audiences. And now actually in a GDPR world, for anyone listening, you do need to still be cautious of how you're using custom audiences. But it is completely a treasure trove. And where Facebook's gotten into trouble, we all know, is they're often making decisions without the customer in mind. They're making decisions for the company, Facebook, and it's paying advertisers. It was not always making decisions about us, the people feeding the data machine.
And I sort of, not being any kind of privacy expert, but just somebody in marketing, I thought to myself, well, most companies are beholden to the people who pay them. They're really not beholden to, and what do you call us? We're not customers of Facebook. We're users of it, but we're not their customer.
Right?
And
No, we're not the pay. We're not the pay. You
that.
can't. I don't even think you can, as a user, pay for something on Facebook. We're just. It's a complete utility for all of us. We're feeding the machine, so Facebook can make billions of dollars selling our data to companies to target us to buy more things.
Right. And what I said to my husband when all of this came out about, Facebook and the election and everything, I said, literally every marketer is not really, we all like, yeah, we knew it could happen. Something like this could happen. But more than that, you also look at like, if something is that powerful, you better get to know that program and how it works and how it's reaching people.
Right,
You know,
right.
because it is a powerful platform.
Extremely powerful. And all really powerful things can be really powerful for good and really powerful for bad.
So what's your prediction on that? Like, I know there's a PBS special, like, will Facebook survive this? What's your thought on it?
I think Facebook will survive. I think it is such a utility. I think the world would fall flat if there wasn't Facebook. It's billions of people around the world that have been connected. I think their revenue stream is going to have to change. I think the privacy laws are making it really difficult and complex. I think they probably need to put in a little bit more protections that really have a better balance. And over the years, especially as they've kind of gotten in trouble with the Federal Trade Commission and others around the world, they do continue to improve and enhance their privacy program. They just need to keep doing it. And part of that challenge is it's a huge company, big, big, big company. And I think it'll probably take maybe another fine. They probably will be fined, again, from Europe. But I do think Facebook will survive, but it'll be a little bit different. They're going to have to find some other monetary options. And it might even be that we, the consumers,
users.
are going
Right.
to start being charged for
Right.
it. And what the company's options will be a little bit limited. I mean, as an example, you used to be able to target by religion. And, that's one of the features that's changing. Because of GDPR. And, some of the other pieces is it used to be considered a third-party pixel, and now they're moving to what's called a first-party pixel because many of the browsers, use Apple as an example, right? We were talking about Apple before. So Apple is starting to block those third-party cookies because they're trying to build privacy into the hardware. So now you have all the software companies that are trying to balance that out. So they're just,
Well, you never
you're
get
always
bored,
gonna,
do you?
you're gonna, there's always, I feel like, when you make a rule, someone else is going to try and figure out how to go
Yeah.
around it, and you just keep
Yeah.
kind of like playing
And
catch
that's
up.
all it keeps going. And that's the way with security as well. So I wanted to ask you about, you have a great blog on your website. And by the way, our website is phenomenal with information. Like you could just get, as a marketer, you can go in there and just spend hours on it. But you have a blog in there that just has some basic things that everyone should know. Can you go through that? Do you remember what it is? Like, that has to do with using Wi-Fi places, having your storage out on 6 different clouds.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a top 10 sort of security tips for SMBs, for small, medium businesses. So I might not remember all 10, but
Do you need
I
to go to
definitely...
your website to catch up?
We can definitely
Okay.
talk about some of the
Okay.
really important ones. So one of the first ones is the cloud providers. So everyone, right, I use Dropbox, and sometimes people want Dropbox and Google and 3 other cloud providers. Well, you need to think about every time you have personal data and you're backing it up, that's multiple different cloud providers that now all have that personal data. So do you really want all that personal data in multiple places? Because that exposes you. The more places your personal data is, then the more at risk you as a company are. So rule number 1 is pick 1 or 2 and minimize them. Also be thinking about, do you do shared, right? Do you have any contractors, freelancers, other companies, other people that you're sharing documents with? And maybe you worked with them 6 months ago, but you haven't since then. You should turn their access off. They shouldn't have access to that anymore. So making sure you have good access controls also tied to the cloud providers that you're using is really important. Wi-Fi. So right, public Wi-Fi. It's great. We can access the internet anywhere in the world. I was literally thinking about, remember when they had cyber cafes? And you had to go to a cafe when you were remote to be able to get to your email? And now we don't have that anymore. Right now you can just pop up your phone that's this mini computer and get Wi-Fi. So I highly recommend, being very careful where you're using public Wi-Fi. And you can get a VPN, which a lot of the bigger companies use, but it's just basically another layer of protection that you can use sort of around that public Wi-Fi. And in the blog, there are several providers that are low cost, easy to use, and will be another protection option. Another one is encryption. So you can literally encrypt your laptop. And I think I put a link to a website that has a really good detail on how to encrypt your laptop. But that way, everything on your laptop is encrypted. So that doesn't mean you should have lax security practices and completely ignore anything. But it is a great another security measure where your entire laptop, is secured.
Right. And, as a marketing person, you end up with everybody's usernames and passwords and all of that stuff that you're going in because they're busy. The business owner is busy, so you go in and you make the Facebook updates and you put on YouTube and yeah, those are things that I always think how important it is to make sure that I'm locked down so that they are.
Right, and the other big one is password. So I know we
Yes.
hear all the time, change your password. And it is frustrating. There's 4,000 username and passwords. And I highly recommend a company like a LastPass. You don't have to use LastPass. It's one of the leading ones. There's some others like it. But with LastPass, you create a really strong password that you have to know, because if you forget it, LastPass will not tell you your password. It's called a master password. So really know your password, because if you lose it, what happens is you lose the access to all the stored passwords. And then let's just say you had 20 sites stored in LastPass, you'd have to reset all 20 sites.
Yeah.
So, but with that, you then don't have to remember 20 different sites of their usernames and passwords. You just remember the single one. And what's really nice about LastPass is you can share access. So let's say you had your email service provider and it was MailChimp, and you want to hire an email marketer to send your emails for you, but you don't want to give them full access to your email account with your password. You can grant them access via LastPass, and they never see the actual password. They just have access as they need to.
That's great.
It's really great. And so that's really becoming a new best practice for companies, is in terms of, client access. A lot of agencies are using LastPass to be able to access on behalf of clients, and they're not sharing passwords.
That makes sense. You have so much great information.
Thank you.
When I read your blog with these basic things, it's a great reminder. And it is redcloveradvisors.com, and we'll also show the web address too during this. But I also wanted to ask you about, you had a great blog on there, the difference in hiring a privacy consultant and hiring an attorney. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so sometimes I'm asked, am I an attorney? And I'm not. I am a business person with 20 years of experience and, have come into this privacy field. And so an attorney, I often work with attorneys, and sometimes for some of my smaller clients, they kind of want, just the consultant piece. So there's extreme value in legal counsel. So if there's a very specific, nuanced legal question, I highly recommend working with an attorney. If it's something along the lines of sort of a daily privacy operational question, then I'm in a cost-effective solution who's working day in and day out on these privacy issues and matters. And what I really bring to the table is the practical implementation. So many times you might receive legal advice and it will say, you need a training program, or don't send personal data in this particular fashion, or you need to have what's called a privacy impact assessment, fancy word for a questionnaire. Ask 5 questions. What are you doing with the data when you're creating a landing page or an email marketing campaign? What I would do is I'd come in and actually work with the company on designing the page, or you have the page and I'm going to review it, right? However it works. So I'm really the practical feet on the ground to make privacy come to life, and especially in the larger companies, what I call really making privacy part of the fabric of the organization.
Because it has to be, right? I mean,
It has to be,
just do something and then just
Otherwise,
and people
it's,
forget it.
Otherwise,
too.
it's just what I call a checkbox activity.
Yeah.
So I think some people do what I also call window dressing. So they put the cookie consent banner on the bottom. They'll do the privacy notice, but then that's it. And they forget that these are actually dynamic, living documents. You need to go back to them every time you're using new personal data, or you're going to create a new page. You have to go back, or work with a new vendor. You have to go back to, what does your notice say? And that's part of the cycle. Where does that fit? When do I do that? And if you did any type of assessment to make sure you're compliant with GDPR or the new California privacy law coming up, it shouldn't just be a long list of activity and you filed it away in your digital file and said, I did that, I'm good, moving on. Instead, you have to, again, make sure it's always up to date. And it doesn't have to be hard. I think when people hear that, they think, oh my gosh, it's another compliance activity. And it doesn't have to be that hard at all. It could be, maybe just an hour a month, or just, like I said at the beginning, right, just another question that you'll be including as you would, how much does it cost, and do I need a contract with it?
Yeah. So, and I know you help with all those things, but I bottom line to me,
when you were talking about the difference in an attorney is they'll just talk to you in a language you won't understand.
Yes.
And then they don't help you implement it, and the bill will be much larger. Those
Yes, I really
takeaways.
try and provide practical advice. And that's often the feedback I get when I'm doing a speech. And I've heard people say, gosh, I've heard that presentation 1,000 times, but you made it actually in English. And I could understand what it is that you're saying. And you gave me action steps to walk away, and I know what to do.
Right.
And that's what I try and speak the language. I was in business. I was you. I am a small business.
Yeah.
Right? I am all those things. And I want everyone to succeed and make it as painless as possible. But it's also really important. And I want to make sure that companies are making it a priority in as simple a way as we can.
Yeah. And one more question. I think we have time for like one more question because we'll go to like 10:30. But let's talk about the California law and how that would affect, people here.
Yep. So the California law is, some call it sort of a mini GDPR. Some people say it's not like GDPR at all. So essentially, out of the Facebook Cambridge Analytica case came, poof, sort of long story. Fast forward, we have this new law. It is effective January 2020. So companies have about 14 months to get ready. And there's unlike GDPR, there are some minimum thresholds. So there's three. The first is a company has to sell and earn revenue of more than 50% of their data. There's probably not a lot of companies that will fall in that bucket. The next one is you need $25 million of revenue. So that's an easier bucket to fill, but a lot of companies will still be smaller. The one where I think it's going to affect a significant number of companies is you need basically 50,000 website visitors per year.
Wow.
So it's about collecting personal data. Personal data under California law, just like GDPR, includes online identifiers. So all those cookies and all the web tracking, basically if you have Google Analytics on your site and everything that you're collecting in there, is going to put you into that household information on the visitors who come to your site. And if you have 50,000 website visitors over the course of the year, you're likely going to fall into scope. So with that, you have to have an enhanced privacy notice. The California law is very focused on selling data. So if anyone listening sells data, you really have to read the law and get some advice to understand what your responsibilities are. And then for anybody, you have individual rights very similar to GDPR. So just as an example, maybe I want to be deleted from your system. So let's use email. Instead of just opting out of your emails, I don't want to receive your newsletters anymore, I want you to actually delete me from your email system. So a company has to be able to handle receiving that request, knowing where all the places that my name is, and delete me.
Ah, interesting.
And that's just one example.
Yeah.
There's many examples or many different individual rights. So that's just one of them. And companies need to be able to manage all of that and do it within 45 days.
Yeah.
And the last piece is really related to data security, kind of where we were talking about before. So there is an individual right of action if a company suffers a security data breach and they're found really to be negligent, that they didn't do any of the steps that they needed to have been doing. There's an opportunity for an individual to sue the company on an individual
Wow.
right. So companies really need to start focusing on their security and making sure that they're doing all the steps that they need to be doing. So
Do you think any of these laws go too far?
the U.S. has taken, we have what's called a sectoral approach. We got HIPAA, we have, the financial ones. Now we're going to have California. And so they haven't really limited what a company can and can't do. What they're trying to do is make a company responsible for the data. So GDPR is pretty limiting. We could have a whole conversation on my thoughts of GDPR. And I like to say I don't make the laws. I just try and help you implement them. But with California, there's a lot of amendments that need to happen with California. It's not very clear, so where it will end up will be kind of interesting. But at the base, California is really designed to give users knowledge and choice. And I think knowledge and choice is a good thing.
Yeah.
How exactly we get there in the California law, again, that's very technical. So I think there's some room. But what you're starting to see is California often leads the charge. So think to yourself,
Yeah.
okay, so I have some people in California. If Jodi from Georgia says I want to opt out or I want to delete my data, are you going to say, no, you're from Georgia? Or are you going to say, okay, I'm going to honor everybody because segregating is probably just not a good best practice. So companies have to start thinking about that. And we have other states who are following suit. So there's many bills across the country that are just like California. So now you'll start thinking, well, I got California and I have state number 1 and state number 2 and state number 5. And so now in the news, you have companies like Apple who, and Facebook and Google and all the big tech giants who don't want a 50-state law approach. That's terrible. and are pushing for a federal law so that it is easier for a company to implement. And you have companies like Apple who say, privacy is literally the most important thing that we need to be thinking about in this next era. And it is critical that users have choice and notice and and knowledge about what's happening with their data. They have some basic fundamental rights. So you have companies like Apple kind of leading the charge, and they're, to me, the pinnacle of I shouldn't say perfect, of a great privacy example. Go to their website and you'll see how they're baking privacy into the phones and into all the hardware and into the software and what your choices are right at the beginning. Not the long, boring privacy notice, but just literally a marketing page that explains, here's what we're doing with Safari browsers. Here's what we're doing with the hardware. And you have Apple leading the charge on worldwide announcing how important privacy is.
Yeah, good. Well, they should, because they've been very critical.
Yes.
If they're going to criticize everyone else, they should be doing well. Jodi, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed it, much more so than I thought. And I remember when you first, reached out to me, and I was like, well, what is that? But yeah, there's a lot to it, and it's something that we deal with every day. So really quickly, do you want to tell people how to get to your website and that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you again for having me. I love talking about this topic, and anywhere I can get a chance to continue the education, I'm really fortunate. So you can find me at redcloveradvisors.com. You can also find me at Jodi at redcloveradvisors.com. And I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Facebook. You can find me by name or by company there, and I look forward to talking with your listeners.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.